Bartosz, Hadala, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm all right, man. It's been a while.
You want to count years?
Yeah, right.
We want to, I say 18
Yeah,
at least.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Because okay, so when did you graduate from Western?
2003.
Okay, so 2003. I got done in 2001. Um, but then I moved to Lansing area, you know. Okay, so then I moved to Lansing area in I think 2003. So then 2003 would have been probably about the yeah. Um, one memory that I have in particular is that recital that we did with Mike Caskey and um, Lyman Medeiros.
Correct.
And yeah, that was real killing. All of your music, and as I think I contributed a few charts to that. That was
I
one of those.
remember that small recital hall.
That's right. That's right. What's the name of that recital hall? I forget. I can't
Yeah,
remember now. But
gone.
yeah, but there was the bigger, the Dalton recital hall, and then there was the smaller joint, and nice, little more intimate. I think probably better acoustics in there too.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So recently, a big influence on you, a big influence on your playing. Chick Corea passed away. And one thing I wanted to make sure that we talked about was, I want to ask you to kind of share your first experiences with Chick, with hearing the music, and then, uh, what his music has meant for you as a musician, for your development, and all of that kind of stuff.
I'll start. Well, someone presented that music to me when I was probably 16, 17. A friend of mine, a bass player, played me a record of Chick and Roy Haynes and Jaroslav Vitosh. That was done for RCM, not RCM, ECM. I'm in Canada. RCM is the Royal Conservatory of Music, for ECM. And that stuff was, it was so unique that this record album I purchased later on, it happened to be an improvised couple of tracks that they did like totally ad hoc, and then they had the music of Thelonious Monk on the other side of the record, whatever, the other album, the other part of it. So he played me the music with Thelonious Monk, some music on it, and that was already, I was hooked on, I think, first of all, the language, the musical language, but then, Miroslav Vitosh on the bass, doing all these crazy, circus-like stuff there, and then rhythmic accuracy. That was another thing I was hooked on. And I really, the language, the contemporary approach to lines and harmony was there. And it's probably related to the fact that I was born, in the 70s. And then I'm not much of a classical guy, but I really liked the contemporary stuff of the 20th century, music of Karol Szymanowski, Scriabin, Prokofiev, all these guys. And, jazz was pretty much like that later on. And they just quickly picked up all that language. Monk was the first one to do these dissonants with force, and he meant it. And Chick was,
Mm.
you know, right there as a probably guy who picked it up and just pushed it even further. So that was, like I said, I was 17 when I heard that music. And then I kept buying albums of his with, for instance, the trio with Dave Wackel and John Patitucci. You know, that was a big hit, and I was listening to it for years. I had it on a tape. You know, I was walking across my hometown, 2 kilometers one way, 2 kilometers the other way, and listening to all these things. And you know, still to this day, I'm amazed at the level of, especially rhythmic level, they were all on. And you know, I think, you know, I love Gary Novak and what Chick did with Gary Novak later on. But I think with Wackel, they had this connection that it was just unbelievable. You know, very exciting stuff. So that was that. But then in '94, I went to Warsaw to see him live with Second Electric Band. And that just blew me away. I just couldn't process the fact that they were actually playing live. You know, this was that kind of, you know, power. I went home, I was like, what was it? Like, was it actually live? Was this music being done live? They were so perfect. And, you know, that Second Electric Band with Gary Novak was really something. I to the point that when I went to New York, I even bought the charts and put the tribute band together to play all that music, just to feel, you know, what it is and try to, you know, grasp the ideas. And obviously at that point, it was over 10 years ago. It was still too much to process. You know, some of these things were just a bit too complicated. Although the guys that I found, especially the drummer, saw the same band in Japan in '94. And we met in New York and we shared the passion for it. And, you know, we picked up those charts and we went for it all the way as much as we could. It was a great run.
Speaking of Chick's Electric Band, I interviewed Frank Gambale recently. That's actually he's on the screen back there, and we had a very interesting conversation. And of course, I asked him about Chick, and he had a very so you know one thing that you hear about Chick is, you know, as great of a musician as he was also really he was also a very giving person, you know, and that, you know, the worst thing that can happen to you, or it's maybe it's not the worst thing, but it's close to the worst thing that can happen to you is you meet your hero and you find out that they're like total jerk, you know. And although I hear often people say that I hear people sort of marginalize that this sort of statistic. It's not really a statistic. This is all anecdotal. But it seems that once an artist gets to a certain level of prominence, there's a disproportionate chance that they're going to be a jerk. What's up with that? It seems like, I don't know. I mean, you work all your life to become, you know, to get on a certain level so that you can be a jerk. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand that, you know. But you know, Chick was not that. You know, he was you know, very generous, you know, a good person, someone that people actually wanted to be around, you know. And I think the sign of a great band leader, I mean, he was able to keep those great musicians together for the long periods of time. So you knew that when people were saying, yeah, this was a really good human being, that it was actually true, you know, because it would be hard to keep that kind of A-list.
Thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video.
A list of musicians together. Yeah. So talk to us about Bartosz as a young person, just sort of getting introduced to music. You know, even before you started playing, maybe what were some of the sounds you heard around the house? Maybe some things about your family upbringing and all that kind of stuff, early mentors, some of that.
So it's all organized in the timeline kind of thing. My father is a musician, clarinetist. He loved jazz. He was a big fan of Benny Goodman. He still is. And he says that a day without swing is a wasted day, you know. So he's that kind of guy, you know, and I must have picked it up from him, just, you know, in the DNA kind of thing. So he had vinyls at home of some Dixieland recordings. He loves Dixieland. And I picked up those. He also had a vinyl of Jimmy Smith, you know, at the house, and some other things. He had Charlie Parker as well, but the Charlie Parker was some kind of a bootleg recording that didn't sound very good, you know, sonically speaking. So I never picked that one up really, but the Dixieland was a big thing for me. So I started at the age of 6 listening to these records. I would plug my record player into this big speaker that I had at house, which had a really nice low end, you know, and I was going bananas listening to this music. Soon afterwards, I went to the piano and started playing these things, because this was sort of, you know, like when the Saints go marching in. So it wasn't crazy difficult to pick up the changes. And that's how it all started. And I was trying jazz for a couple of years on my own, and finally went to some kind of a workshop thing. And the guy said, you have to go to a real thing, you know, to jazz camps in Poland, because there's American musician coming, there's the best of the Polish guys coming, and they will teach you the next thing to do, you know, because he saw that I was kind of playing around the blues scale and nothing else was, you know, there, speaking about the language, you know. So I went to these workshops, and the first guys I met was Orville Wright from Berklee College of Music, Greg Badolato, tenor player and theory guy. We're talking 1993, 1994, 95. I think I went for 3 years, one after another, and I met all these guys. And then I met, you know, Polish guys who are really, you know, still are playing, great guys with great knowledge of things and styles and stuff like that. So that was the beginning of it. And then I started dreaming about, you know, Berklee College of Music. And I even went all the way to Paris on the bus to audition for Berklee. And they said, yeah, you're welcome to come in. We have 50% of the tuition for you. If you have another 50, you know, you're more than welcome to come, you know. And obviously money was an issue, you know, for Polish people to meet that $20,000 a year was impossible. So I waited and waited. And I think through one of the festivals in Poland, I got invited to a camp. And at that camp was Tom Kniffik and Trent Kinniston. And that connection was through Włodek Pawlik, Polish pianist, Grammy Award winner. And that's how we've met. So I spoke to Tom. Tom knew about how to bring students in if they were worthy to bring them from Poland, because Renata, his wife, already had Polish students in her studio. So Tom knew how to make this all happen. Steve Zagri got on the you know, bandwagon kind of thing, and they put the money together, and they one, you know, day I received an email saying, you know, if you're willing to come, the money is there, you can start, you know, starting next year with us. So amazing story.
Yeah, man. Can you talk a little bit about Steve Zagri, rest in peace, Steve Zagri. Can you talk a little bit about him? He was your teacher.
First of all, you remember him, an energy, a ball of energy, running, always trying to push you to the limits almost. As you remember, part of the curriculum was doing classical music and jazz for us. So he knew I had a strong classical background, so he wasn't giving up on that. He would push me, as much as he could there. And then he wanted me to learn jazz the proper way. But I was so already, fixed on guys like Chick that it was really hard for me to go back and study Red Garland, which he wanted me to do, and Oscar Peterson and all these guys. And, I never apologized to him, but I should. I didn't study them as much as I should have, because this whole new thing was there. And then, even when I met you, or I met Mike Kasky, he was also into that kind of, newer stuff. And because he was a drummer, this whole fusion world was there. So up to this point, I'm still going back and trying to, see if I am able to sound a little bit, like I know the history of jazz. I study those voicings, I study those things. Whenever I hear things, I absorb things much quicker now. So when I listen to these guys, I see what it was all about. And that was Steve Zagri. He really wanted us to study everything that was possible. And his famous phrase was, like, if one day Wynton Marsalis calls you and he wants you for a gig, that stuff, you can go there and you can show him what you can do. Yeah. And unfortunately, some guys could do that, like, Xavier Davis. I'm sure he could do that. I wasn't that kind of guy. I was so fixed on, like Danilo Perez and all this other kind of brand of jazz. But he was, an amazing educator, and really, I had a great time with him. And he did everything he could to also, give us what we wanted, inviting Fred Hirsch into the studio, and then Kenny Werner and Danilo. All these guys were there if we wanted to explore more. So I really, I had a great time with him.
Yeah, something about Steve Zagri, Dr. Steve Zagri, is he's really very much responsible for the sort of academic approach to vocal jazz.
Rightly so.
He's not the only, he's not the only one. So, I don't want anybody to get upset with me for saying it like that. But Gold Company, there was nothing like Gold Company before Gold Company. And all of these colleges and universities, it's the gold standard, right? And all of the great singers that came through that program, really incredible. And I remember, because, at times, sort of Steve and I we sort of bumped heads, so to speak. I mean, it was really no competition. He was a faculty member and I was a student. But I felt some sort of tension at times. And then the older I've gotten, I've realized now that there was a lot similar about us. We're both very driven. And but yeah, I mean, he was an incredible educator. Yeah, it's that was really tragic, how he passed away and everything. It's just like overnight too. I mean, he got that diagnosis and then it was just over. It was just really aggressive. So rest in peace, Steve. I appreciate, what you did for Western, and frankly, because of the sort of aggression that he pursued the whole vocal jazz thing with. That's probably why we even knew about the school. I mean, I mean, that's really the sort of beacon light on that school is, so anyhow. Um, so, talk to us a little bit about, because one thing I knew about you then, and of course I know about you now. I mean, even just before we started rolling, you mentioned Easter. Is you're a Christian. That's a serious thing about you. Can you talk maybe a bit about how that sort of impacts your music?
Tough one, because I was raised Catholic from day one. I'm baptized in the Catholic Church, and this whole journey of being Catholic never ends, as we know. It goes through the gates of death into something else. So it's, I've been always very close to church, and to the point that in 2004, I started working for the Catholic Church as an organist in New York City. So I've been working as an organist ever since. I was the guy in demand because I could do Polish and English masses. And then there was groups, and there were choirs, and there were things, and there were places where I would hire jazz musicians like Hadala to come and play in my church, and John Irebagan and many other guys, because I had them in New York City, so I would call them and they would play soprano saxophone, or other people, drummers, bassists, everybody was there. That still continues through this day. I'm with a Catholic church right now, working for a church here in Toronto, a Polish parish, also with English masses there. And one event I want to mention about the music was that there was a Monsignor in Brooklyn who had Polish roots, and he wanted me to write music for Palm Sunday once. He picked a few verses from the gospel, and I was supposed to write the music and invite musicians to play. And we even managed to get Billy Hart to play with us on drums that day. So it was really cool because priest was really serious about it. It was a beautiful cathedral in Brooklyn, St. James Cathedral. And he managed to he said, go get the piano. We'll put it in the sanctuary and we'll do the show. So I went to Yamaha Salon on Fifth Avenue. I picked the piano. They dropped the piano in the church. They brought the state-of-the-art guys doing the sound for us. And it was Billy, Gary Wang on drums, Justin Binnick sang with us. I invited him.
Yeah.
And it was me, and there was Paul Makarevich, I think, from Chicago, trumpet player, who joined us as well. So I wrote music for that. And, so if I had a chance to do this one more time, I would. Those jazz vespers are really popular around Toronto. Whenever I can, I jump on these as well. This is a really cool service with the priest praying, and then you play music in between. It can be anything. If they invite jazz musicians, can be, full-blown jazz kind of thing. So I stay there.
Great. Yeah, I did I'm the minister of music at Second Baptist Church, and that's a missionary Baptist church. And the pastor's quite progressive. He's a great musician himself. He's a great singer. He's a piano player, and he was doing double duty. He was the minister of music and the pastor before I took the position at the church. and he has a history of doing music at churches, and so he's a really, really great guy for me to work for because he really kind of understands what I'm dealing with. And so anyhow, I this was one of the last concerts that I did before the pandemic started. So what was this? February?
Sure.
Oh goodness, it was the first. No, it wasn't. Maybe it was like the third Sunday in February. So that's 2021. Okay, yeah. So 2020, and we did uninterrupted. I brought in the jazz faculty from Ohio State, and we did uninterrupted A Love Supreme, all four movements. And that was part of the Black History Month thing. You know, I did a presentation about Coltrane before the service, and so that was sweet.
Is it somewhere on YouTube to check out?
It is. It's actually on my channel.
Perfect.
The whole thing's on my channel.
Right. The only other guy I know that did this was Brentford with his quartet, right?
Right. And goodness, so that is that music's natural habitat. You know, it wasn't like that music didn't belong there and I was trying to squeeze it in. It was, that's where that music belongs, you know. And what was the other thing I was going to say? And I wrote I wasn't raised Orthodox, but I'm an Orthodox Christian. And so let's see here. I came into the church in 2004. And one thing that I started to miss, because when I took the job at Ohio State, I stopped playing in church, and that was always like something I was doing, but I also needed a break because I had there were a couple situations that didn't go maybe the way that I thought they should have went. And so I just needed to sort of kind of take a break from it. So I took a break for a couple years, but I missed it. I miss playing in church, and the kind of church, the Orthodox church is all a cappella and stuff. And that was great. And it's beautiful, and I wouldn't change it. But I wanted to play in church again. So I started playing again. It was in a Baptist church, New Salem Baptist Church, and that's actually the church that's where I met my wife. Playing there, and then I started thinking, you know what? Is there a way to connect, this sort of gospel music and Orthodox Vespers? And so I remember even doing a podcast. It was like one of these sort of conversion story sort of podcasts. And this guy named Lee Zappis, and I interviewed him. He's a philanthropist. He heard that. He's Orthodox himself, but he also has a history in radio. And so he heard me talking about that. So he reached out to me. He was like, hey, is this something that we talked about it and everything. And I wrote him a proposal. And then several years went by, and then the stars aligned. And then I wrote a gospel, Black gospel setting of an Orthodox Vespers, not of the entire Vespers, but about a third of the Vespers. And that was premiered at Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church here in Columbus. That was also during the Black History Month. It was the 1st of February. It was on a Saturday. That was also one of the last things that happened before the pandemic started. So that seems like ancient history, but really wasn't that long ago. But if folks want to check that out, that's if you go to howsweetthesound.net, and I'll put a link in the description here. But so the whole, I think, the spirituality thing in music, they seem to be the same thing. Okay, so maybe let me reframe. So how does jazz, how does it reconcile is not the right word. How is it compatible with your faith? And in music in general, how is that compatible with your faith? And this seems like a backwards question, but I think a lot of musicians actually struggle with this idea of being a Christian and playing quote unquote secular music.
Sean, I'll go from here. God did create the world, okay? Let's say he improvised. He did improvise, and he liked what he saw, and he kept going. This is where I find the connection, okay? He started this thing out of love, and he liked what he saw. And we are the last thing he put on earth, and in his image, to do more of the same, to create. The earth is recreating itself. It's still in motion. Things are still developing. Continents are shifting. Things are changing around. And we are part of this energy. We are part of his plan, and we're also creating. And I think that's where our role is as an artist, to keep creating this world, make it more beautiful, make it something, but the creation is at the heart of God's plan, I think. And I cannot find anything more obvious there.
Yeah, it seems like these sort of okay, so the Protestant Reformation, there are some artifacts and some byproducts of that. One of them is this sort of sacred secular dichotomy. So prior to the Protestant Reformation, there wasn't really a lot of talk about this sacred secular dichotomy because it wasn't really framed in that way. I'd say that it's a false dichotomy, right? So, in the early church, it was a very simple thought about art. Whatever is beautiful glorifies God. And so it's just about creating beauty. Now, certainly we can say that there's a difference between the purpose of there could be a different function for certain kinds of music. So you could say this is liturgical music. That's not to say that it is more holy than music that is not liturgical music. It's just to say this is how this music is constructed. It's constructed to participate in this interplay between the priest and the congregation, the call and response. It's a through composed component of the service. It's liturgical, right? So I've never had an issue with playing whatever it is that I'm playing and and still being able to, it's all, to me, it's all worship. It is all worship, right? It's not just what happens on Sunday. It's not just the music that is played at church that is holy and separated. It should be all of the things that we do, and not just the music that we do, but obviously our behaviors also, right? So that's really what is important. So what do you think of that?
I agree with you 100%. I know that some artists, who are great musicians and they create great stuff, and all of a sudden they say, I don't want to have anything to do with church, or I don't find this connection between, spirituality. I am so creative myself that, this is all I do. In their heads, it might be true, but still we don't know how we fit into the plan, the big picture. So, he may be thinking that it's him, but actually, we have to open up to get some light and let things go. And most of the guys, even if you talk to Kenny Werner, he'll tell you that all he has to do is open up and let the music flow through him. He doesn't feel like the creator. So, I think all of us getting up to a certain level, we want the same thing. We kind of want to be the tools just to put the music forward. So, we try to cut the thinking and let the music flow. So I think we're all part of the same, creative spirit coming straight from above through us into the world,
Yeah, I Hubert Laws has a kind of a similar, seems to have a sort of similar approach. He takes this sort of opinion that, though you take credit for a composition, really things are just rearrangements of stuff that already exist, and it's just a matter of sort of assembling things. And in that sense, it's, as you're saying, there is this sort of creative force, so to speak, and we are sort of channeling that force.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me that our job is to try to. Okay, so practicing is about getting to the point where you can remove yourself,
removing obstacles. Yeah, remove obstacles and ourselves.
Yeah. Speaking of practicing,
tough one.
So, I've had an interesting sort of kind of relationship with practicing. And I've gone on the record several times, and I tell my students this frequently. I don't really like to practice. Now, I practice a lot, because if you don't practice, then you have no hope at removing these obstacles, right? But it's not really. Now, okay, I mean, I love to fart around, right? I mean, do a bunch of stuff, play, mess around with toys and sound and stuff, and lay down, you're not really accomplishing anything, but you're playing your instrument. I love that. I mean, I can do that for all day. But actually practicing, that's kind of a different matter, So I'm saying that to ask you, what is your relationship been with the practice room over the years?
It used to be very organized, because when I started at the age of 7, I had to go through classical training in Poland. I had no other choice of completing anything if I didn't play classical music. There was no option for me to join a jazz high school. We didn't have those back in Poland at all. So it was classical music, 6 years, first primary musical school, secondary musical school, another 6 years. This was lining up nicely with 8 years of elementary school plus 4 years of high school. So the total of 12 years of studying would give you a diploma, and you were able to actually start teaching at the primary level. You were able to get a job after that. And if you wanted more, you had to go to university or academy and study another 5 years to become the master, to get the master's degree. And then you could teach all levels, primary and secondary musical school. So that was Poland. And so for me, that practice was, it had to happen. And I was also very ambitious, even though, somewhere there, I knew I wasn't going to be a classical musician. I knew that there was a limit to what I could do as a classical pianist. I knew that at some point, but nevertheless, I was still very ambitious. So I practiced a lot to at least beat the competition around me, right? Sometimes I was successful, sometimes I wasn't that successful, but it was a fair thing. I was there every weekend, Saturday, Sunday, 5-6 hours at the piano, going all the way. When I went to Ukraine to study for 2 years, that was all I was doing. I was practicing or memorizing the music from the page without the instrument. That was part of the game. I was just, right there just to do more music. And I was playing duets with some amazing Chinese pianists who were, so much better than I was, but it's part of the learning process. And then when I came to Western Michigan University, I was finally reaping the rewards of all that hard work that I put in for 14 years. I was actually able to kind of chill, pick the music I really wanted to play. I had some great music in my repertoire, music by Szymanowski and other composers. And it was a time kind of when I was actually able to study jazz, and I could do still classical music at the, fair level to get a good grade in my exams and stuff like that. Later on in life, when I finished school, New York, when I lived in New York, that was kind of tough. I didn't have piano. I didn't have a piano for years. I just bought my baby grand a few years ago. I was on the keyboards for so many years, and I had to say it actually worked. I never thought I would say it, but actually on those keyboards, I was surviving. My technique was good enough to do still classical gigs like I do up to this day as a classical accompanist for singers and instrumentalists. And but all these years of hard work, those 14 years, are still there, and I'm still reaping the rewards of the time I put in.
Now, let me ask you: were you always excited to get in the practice room, or did you have moments where you knew you had to do it, you were going to do it, but wasn't really something that you wanted to do?
When you're in school for this, it's kind of part of, where you're in for. So of course, there's moments when you'd rather be doing something else. But I remember more of like being tired from the amount of things I had to do throughout the day, that instead of, practicing in the practice room, I would be actually laying down on the piano bench and trying to get some sleep. I remember those moments. So just being tired from overall the thing. But, being at Western was my absolute dream come true. I don't know if I ever told you how much it meant to play with you, my friends. And, I haven't played with Miles or Coltrane, but I played with you, and being in your quartet was the top of anything I could have accomplished, a white boy from Poland coming into America playing with Sean Wallace. I mean, come on. That was really amazing. And, so that Western thing was a dream come true for me on so many levels, and I'll be forever grateful to Tom and Trent and Steve for making it happen.
Yeah. Speaking of Trent, I interviewed Trent also. That was a quite nostalgic, I learned so much from that guy. Man, he Trent had this. He has this. It's a pretty organic approach. So, but the genesis of it was him learning how to do something himself, and then he would sort of organize and create a sort of more streamlined path for someone else to follow, you know. And so yeah, he's a great teacher, and has had a lot of great students. Speaking of a couple of his students, Rob Haight.
Oh yeah. Oh
Rob
yeah.
Haight there. Just interviewed him not too long ago, and of course John Wojciechowski.
Oh yeah.
Was one of my earlier interviews. But we talked a little bit about him, and it's interesting. Like with John and I, we have sort of similar approaches to teaching certain concepts, and of course the thing that we have in common is Trent. And if we know that that's where it came from or not, I mean, it's pretty obvious that that's where it came from, you know.
Yeah.
So anyhow, all right. So you have a couple projects, a pretty recent project that you completed, right? Well, I guess, plug anything that you'd like to plug, but maybe talk a little bit about the last maybe couple projects.
I'll start with the last one because I'm really proud of what happened in Toronto. I left America in 2010 and we moved up north, and I've been here for 11 years. I don't know how much you know about Toronto jazz scene. Lots of guys, not that many opportunities to play. Some guys do things you do, some guys teach. Humber College is the place here in Toronto where all these guys like Mark Kelso, Mike Downs, and Pat LaBarbera that I'm sure you know, and many other guys. We have, they have the same kind of line of guys like Danilo coming in and teaching, doing master classes and stuff like that. So that school is really happening, and some guys are there. And then the rest of us are kind of trying to make it happen, in town. But unfortunately, there weren't that many places, classy places, or places that would pay at least, some money. So between the Rex Hotel and the Jazz Bistro place that used to be Montreal Bistro, and there weren't that many opportunities. There's also a jazz room in Waterloo, great place, but there aren't that many that you can actually, put the band together, rehearse it, and promise them some income, at the end of the day. So it took a couple, good almost 10 years for me to kind of organize these things, meet a lot of people, and finally find the guys that I really, really like, and that were excited about my project. So we put this band together with Luis Dennis on alto sax, Cuban guy, Marito Marques, he's a Portuguese drummer who lives in Toronto. He does all sorts of things. He's the master of the world music, but I love him in the jazz setting because I know he knows how to improvise. He loves to improvise, and this is probably one of the few situations when he can let loose and play who he is. It's a great project for him, I think, and a great bass player, Brad Cheeseman, and guitarist Eric St. Laurent from originally from Montreal. Amazing guy who has a little bit of that Pat Metheny tone in him, but really clever guy. So I put this project together, music, and we went into the studio, and this record was released last year, officially on March 1st, 2 weeks before the pandemic started.
Yeah.
So we did the gig at the Jazz Bistro, full house, amazing. We booked another date later on for June, and this was it. And another gig we played was in October in Waterloo, because that place wasn't really shut down like Toronto was. So we had a chance to play, and I would love to play some more with them, but it's getting tricky these days.
So speaking of Toronto, I interviewed Virginia McDonald, the great clarinetist.
Oh yeah, clarinetist.
Yeah. So you know her.
I know Kirk, her father, tenor player, and Virginia,
Yeah. She can play.
She's been at it. I remember her when I came to Toronto. She was already, there trying her best, and then 10 years later, I hear her productions here and there, and then she tours with her father sometimes. They tour to Europe and stuff. Like, yeah, that's what she does.
Yeah, she's super bad. We had an interesting conversation, and one of the topics that we discussed is relationships. Musicians' relationships. Romantic relationships, right? That's been an area that a lot of musicians haven't been particularly successful in. It's and part of the reason is because it takes a special person to understand why you want to practice 5 hours a day for a gig that pays $50.
Exactly.
It's a special person that's going to understand that. Now, at some point, it can't be $50 anymore, because that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, you have to survive, you have to pay bills, you have to support your family and all of that kind of stuff. But it takes a special person to understand that. And in another interview, I talked to who was it that I was talking to? Who was that? I think it was. Oh yeah. It was Champion Fulton. So we were talking about, okay, should you date someone that's an artist if you're an artist, or should you date a normie? Because potentially both of those scenarios would be challenging, right? Because if you date an artist, then you're both so driven after your art, and I tell my students all the time, if you're successful as an artist, that means that when everyone else is on, the 9 to 5 people, the normies, then you're on. When the normies are off, you're on. When the normies are on vacation, you're on. When the normies are, they're doing, holiday parties and getting married.
Yeah, you're playing those parties.
Receptions. That's right. You're on. So it's a really demanding thing. And if you have 2 people that are doing that, that can be really, really challenging. But on the other side, maybe you'll understand each other a little bit better, and won't take it personally that you have to spend all of these hours really focusing on, this instrument, What do you think about that? I'm curious. I mean, you said we moved to Toronto. Who's we?
My wife, Agnes, who remembers you very well. So we must have played something. She remembers a gig. We were just talking about it. She remembers you at the gig with me sometime around 2003, because I was finishing and she was there only for 6 months or 4 months. So somehow we've all met in the same room. We have been in the same room at least. So my wife and 3 kids now. One of them was born in New York. 2 of them were born in Toronto. 1 girl, 2 boys, in that order. And so what I think about relationships, there, of course, I started thinking about couples, Joe Lovano and his wife, a singer and a painter. And then there's some other couples that you can think of. Jerry Allen and Wallace, right? The trumpet player, they were musicians, but there aren't maybe that many. I don't know. I think that what would be the best? Two artists. It will be tough to take care of the family if two of you are on. I don't know who takes care of the family if there are kids, maybe grandmas and grandpas. If you're happy, if you're lucky, if they're there, if they want to do it, you know how that goes. But in my case, like you said, she works. I'm with the kids. She comes back. I can go and do some of my things. So it worked out perfectly for us, especially with the church gig. You know, like Monday through Friday, I do Saturday, Sunday. And with kids, it actually has been a problem solver for many years now. So,
Yeah.
and another thing is that, you know, even though we are artists, we actually have the talent and gifts and skills to make things happen. And sometimes I think that person who walks strongly on earth and is very down to earth sometimes helps you to keep the balance between the heady stuff and the real life things, you know, and it also, it helps your music anyway. You know, you have to be human to give something to this music, something real, you know. If all you do is just notes, maybe you don't know anything about struggles of the people around you, you know, when you're in a family, especially, right? That's a different story. I mean, you're right there fighting to survive and do things. And then you can do music that's, I think, will have a little bit more value.
Yeah, this is all good stuff, man. You know, it reminds me of this, you know, so you're talking about the relationship of an artist to the people around them, right? So if all you do is practice and you don't actually interact with people, then what are you going to write about?
True. Yeah.
What are you composing about? You're composing about your relationship with the closet? You know, what are you going to write about? It's got to be about people, about stuff, you know, things you have to have some sort of experience to draw from. There are a lot of really, really talented musicians that, dare I say, maybe have a little bit of overexposure of the practice room, you know, because it has to be at the detriment of something. I mean, because you only have 24 hours in a day, right?
Yep.
So by spending whatever the amount of time is, that means that you're necessarily not spending it with, you know, people, other stuff, doing other things, you know. And that's going to sound crazy, because obviously, I mean, I'm a proponent of practicing. You know, I want my students to practice. I think that practicing is very important, but I think if that's all you do, I think that you're going to become seriously out of balance. You know?
Yeah.
So we have had a really, we've had a tough last year. And without even considering all of the political unrest, the, you know, the racial stuff, you know, even without considering all of that, I mean, this has been like a really quite ridiculous, you know, time period that we're living in right now. Can you talk a little bit about how the sort of pandemic has affected, maybe good also, but how it's maybe presented some challenges for you as far as music goes?
Well, what happened to the music, we know we don't have an audience to play for. We were trying to create this by doing online shows, but I don't think it works. It has to be energy between body to body in a room setting, performance venue kind of thing. I was thinking about it today. We are right now in a terrible situation. Of course, that you're a professor at the university. I do have a steady job where I make money, so I shouldn't be complaining about things. But we are not expressing ourselves. Maybe we are serving others. We are making money by serving others, but we also, as an artist, would like to actually express ourselves in front of the live audience. This things has been taken away. And I know I'm not speaking just for myself. Everybody I talk to in the music business is very in a very tough situation. Mentally, people are trying desperately to find things to hang on to and kind of, move on, hoping for the best that something will happen. But it's been tough for me as well. Luckily, I still have a 2-year-old in a house. So I have, hands full of duties, and I have to, be there, and I have to protect him from killing himself and doing other things. So, I'm lucky in that way. But people that don't have that distraction from the situation around us, it must be really tough if you're, God forsake, alone, or you thought that you're going to focus on music and this period hits.
Mm-hmm.
It must be really, really tough.
Now, have there been any silver linings?
Not yet. Just some gigs, some things here and there that we go into, projects and
well, so some folks that I've talked to, quite a few actually, especially those that were kind of heavy touring artists, they've said, you know what, this has been a time to not have to tour, to actually get to see my house, to spend more time with family, to all of that kind of stuff. It seems with your regular flow that you were seeing your family a lot before the pandemic anyway.
Exactly.
But it is tough to think of things that are positive about this. It's very hard. And look, I'm not an optimist. I'm a realist, right? So that makes it very challenging to look at what's going on and to see a lot of positive stuff. I could say a few things I think they're positive. Us probably doing this right now was probably because of the pandemic. So
that too, yeah.
that's positive. But yeah. And then it's like, what's going to happen? Like when everything opens back up, are things going to be so damaged that it's not going to ever be the same, there's always...
I worry about artists, and myself too, that if it goes on for too long, some people will the fire will be put, away, and we won't be able we won't find joy, or we'll just realize that we actually managed to live without it. So do we have to, what's the struggle for again? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? It's a really tough mental spot. I hope I'm not going, I'm not going mental at this point, but, I think about those things that unfortunately we'll lose the purpose, might be losing purpose of it, at the end of this whole thing, because again, we feed off of the live audience. We have to have these people there, and church, even, for me, it's not this, it's not the same, because I'm serving a very specific purpose. No one's applauding my good notes or bad notes, or
look,
booing.
it's not even acoustically the same,
No.
let alone the sort of, feedback that you're getting from a congregation or from an audience. The, what was that? Man, I lost it. We were talking about it'll have to come back. Or maybe maybe it won't come back. That's all right.
It won't.
But
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. I hope, because the thing the people say is that the waves never end. However, politicians will choose to approach this. And in America, actually, there have been people like the governor of South Dakota who said they never shut down economy there. She actually did everything she could to protect the people, but the shutdown never happened. We have to deal with it like this. I think, if it's a virus, everybody is going to get it. If everybody's going to get it, let's do what we can to protect ourselves and do what we should be doing, because, mental health, I think, in general, the entire nations is going to be damaged at the end of this whole thing.
Yeah. I agree with that. It's man, just the thought of, what, we could have done this thing without shutting everything down and probably be in the same spot as we are right now.
Yeah.
As far as, yeah.
It's hard not to believe those, conspiracy theorists who are multiplying and say that there's a bigger agenda behind the whole thing. And even if it's just like, eliminating the middle class.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man, but if those small businesses shut down, that class is gone. I'm not that class, but there are people who actually have, more than I do, and they have families and they have bills and stuff like that. If they eliminate that class, there will be only the richest and the poorest, and the gap will be just like from the sky to the earth.
Yep. Yeah. All right. So all right. So hobbies.
Tough one.
Hobbies. Yeah. So do you have any hobbies?
I love basketball. I love it. I was a big fan of Chicago Bulls when I was a teenager. We would watch these games at 3 a.m. in the morning, because that's what time it was in Poland to watch these playoffs games. Obviously, it was the time of Michael, Jordan flying around, right? So we couldn't resist. And then I came to the States and I kind of dropped this idea. I mean, I didn't have time. I was busy with music. I went to a game to see New York Knicks once. But then finally 2 years ago, my brother-in-law came and he says, we have to go see Raptors. We have to go see Raptors. And I went to see the game. They were winning championship that year. So I get so hooked on this whole thing again that, I'm watching NBA back and forth right now.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. I love it.
It's good to have something, that is away from music, is wonderful and is all encompassing and fulfilling as music is and can be. It's nice to have something else,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to some folks and I ask if you have any hobbies. Oh, no. My hobby is music.
It's your profession is music.
That's
exactly.
Right. In other words, they don't have any hobbies. That's what.
Well, I mean, I understand. We all been there, I think, right? We've been so focused on this thing, and trying to accomplish things. man, I was mad at this whole thing, especially, going to New York and trying to meet all these guys, and, even putting this record together with Randy and Antonio Sanchez and some guys there. Like, that was, dream come true above the dreams, of mine. I mean, again, a guy from Poland out of nowhere, in New York City playing with Randy Brecker. I mean, can it get any cooler than that, So that was that period, and then you realize that, it's your profession. I mean, the coolest thing about jazz, I'm the happiest that I'm doing jazz, like, if anything, if I could do this once more again from the beginning, from the scratch, I would love to be a jazz musician. This whole approach to music, this freedom, meeting these people, feeding off of their energy, their rhythm, their experience, and then taking all that experience into sacred music that I play. I get a sheet of music with lyrics on it. I have to sing it and organize it for myself on the organ, because I know the genre a little bit of, Bach and all that stuff. So I'm able to move some voices and make it sound pretty. But it all comes from jazz. It's all the theory that I get from there. It's understanding the composition, because I'm a jazz musician and a composer. So everything I play, I analyze at the same time. I don't play it just to play the notes. I have to know what this thing is so I can reuse it or abandon it, in the future. So that thing is really, I mean, I taught some courses in Poland some time ago for students. And I say, I don't know how much jazz there is in this world left, or audience for this thing, for you to make money off of that. But the knowledge you're getting and this whole perspective that you have as a jazz musician is priceless. Classical musicians would kill for this thing, that you understand where you are harmonically in the piece and how this whole thing, is done. I think it's really cool.
So, Bartosz, you have a final word. Say maybe if you can say something encouraging to a student, or someone that maybe they're not sure about music, or if this is going to be what they are going to do. Maybe they've been a little bit discouraged, by it. But in their heart of hearts, they really want to be a musician for a living. Is there something that you can say that to be encouraging to them?
Yes, sir. We go back to Chick Corea. I emailed him once, and he sent me this message. He said, "The world needs as many musicians as it can get." I believe it, As a musician, you are, first of all, giving to the people, but you're also understanding the music that you're listening to. You are a much better person as an audience member, and then as a giver, you're also giving to this world. So I agree with him, and I'm saying it knowing that not everybody's going to reach the toppest level that there is, but we are actually, by studying music even a little, we are becoming so much more aware of things. And we're not just the general audience that listens to the radio and says, "Oh, this is great." We actually search for music that gives us something. I think that's actually the best thing that can be, that's the part of music education that, makes us a smarter audience.
That's very well said, sir. Very well said.
Thank you. Do you remember when I couldn't speak English? You should remember that.
Well, it's funny because I am very non-judgmental about people that English is their second language, because English is the only language that I speak. Well, okay, English and music. Those are the two languages, right? But I mean, I always understood what you were saying. So. And plus, we had music in common. That was the music was that was the language in common. So we were
passion on the same page.
Yeah, we were totally.
Yeah, man.
Well, God bless you and your family.
You too, man. Thank you.
we're gonna have to do this again sometime.
Right after the pandemic,
That's right.
we'll discuss the situation.
That's right. All right. Well,
Cool.
God bless you
Thank
and
you.
your family.
Thanks,
I'll see
Sean.
you.
Peace,
All
man.
right.
Bye.
All right, bye.